Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, I gave a moment's thought to what I would tell you about myself, but really, even before I began to think, I knew I wanted to tell you more about how I think and what I believe than about the narrative details of my life. You see, I like to collect ideas, and once I collect them, like a dog, I gnaw on them like a bone. And several years ago, I was looking for a book for my younger daughter who's quite artistic, something that would inspire her. And I found a book by Michael Gell, and he studied Leonardo da Vinci intensely to understand that great Renaissance man's life. He developed 7 principles that he felt captured the essence of Leonardo da Vinci. Over time, I've adapted and adopted those principles for myself. And they are: first, seek the truth. Second, take responsibility for your search. Third, sharpen your awareness. Fourth, cultivate balance. Fifth, nurture integration of the mind and body. Sixth, embrace paradox and ambiguity. And number 7, practice love. Now 7 is far too ambitious for this speech. In fact, I started with 4, and that was far too ambitious. Most of the things I take on when I start, I'm far too ambitious. But I do manage to scope myself down to something reasonable. So I'm going to take the first 3 principles, and I'm going to talk about how I've begun to seek the truth and take responsibility for my search and sharpen my awareness through reminiscence that take me back to my childhood. I peaked in the 3rd grade. I was on top of the world. I was king of the playground. I ruled the play group of children my age in the neighborhood. The teachers and students, they admired me for my academic excellence and my wit. My younger brother, my parents were the bedrock and foundation of my existence. Life was wonderful. But into each life, a little rain falls. And it happened that my father was crippled in a construction accident, and shortly after that, my mother passed. I began to ask myself hard questions because my idyllic childhood existence was interrupted. And I took refuge in the library, and I began to read. First, I read a lot of fiction, and that helped me to escape. But I began to read nonfiction too, and I was horrified at what I learned. Because the lessons I was being taught in my classes, the anthologies of literature that I was reading, the histories, the stories in the histories that I was being taught, even the science lessons were a fraud. They were a pale imitation of the real thing. They were like the shadows that Plato talks about that are cast against the wall by the fire when he describes how our perceptions and our senses deceive us and don't show us the true reality. So I took responsibility for my search, and I began to try to understand the world. That started, I guess, in college, where I decided to major in math. Mathematics is a pure truth, after all. It's the language of science. But also, I sought classes that would broaden my knowledge. I took literature classes with English majors. I took a botany class with science majors. I took a rhetoric and logic class with pre-law students. I looked for classes in my own major area that guided the foundations of mathematics and truth. Because mathematics ought to connect to that philosophy and that science and ought to reveal the truth. When I had an opportunity to come to the Naval Postgraduate School, I studied operations research analysis, which is the applied truth. And today I work to try to take scientific tools and help us to understand military operations. But the truth is, I'm no closer to finding the truth today than I was when I started. And I could talk more about that, but I'll save that for another day. Because I do want to talk about the 3rd principle that I'm going to cover, and that's sharpening my awareness. And back to my youth with another reminiscence. As a boy, I rode a dirt bike, and I've loved riding motorcycles ever since. Just a few years ago, I rode my current motorcycle from San Antonio to San Diego to Monterey. It was a wonderful adventure. When you're on a motorcycle, you have to have a keen awareness of what's going on around you. I also found when I came into the Army out of high school how important it was to have awareness. I came into the Army to calculate ballistic solutions for field artillery, to fire rounds downrange. But I learned that I just didn't have an aptitude for the mathematics, but I had to have an aptitude for understanding everything that was going on. You had to be in the moment, you had to be perfectly aware of everything that was going on, because bad things happen when you make mistakes there. I have what psychologists like to describe as an experiential personality. I pick up hobbies and experiences and I enjoy them, and some of them I keep, most of them I cast away. Thoreau tells us to suck the marrow from life. I suck the marrow from those hobbies. I'd like to talk about a lot of those too, but and I will at a future time. But I think in those three principles that I've talked about, seeking the truth, taking responsibility for that search, and sharpening awareness, I see here in Toastmasters an opportunity for all three. And I hope that I'll be able to do that with you, and that together we can explore the ambiguity and paradox that's part of the human existence as we all improve our skills. Thank you.